Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
If you can hear me, take an encryption button off the trial.
Hello, True Spies listeners. Welcome back to our new assignment, True Spies Debrief. No one knows both Washington, D.C. and Silicon Valley as well as Dr. Amy Zegart. Dr. Zegart is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, a professor of political science by courtesy at Stanford University, and the author, most recently, of the book Spies, Lies and Algorithms, The History and Future of American Intelligence. For years, she has worked to bridge the divide between the worlds of policy and tech. True Spies producer Morgan Childs caught up with Dr. Zegart to hear her thoughts on the dangers of spytainment, her insights on espionage in the age of AI, and her hope for more informed policymaking to prepare for the world ahead.
Amy, I have to say that spending time with your work in preparation for this conversation has been eye-opening for me as a producer of an espionage podcast, as I suspect that it would for any regular listener of our podcast or, in fact, of any other spy podcast. And so I want to start with a really big question that may be of particular interest to our audience and also just consumers of spy fiction and spy entertainment in general, which is, why is it important for the public to understand what spying and intelligence gathering really look like in real life?
So, Morgan, I'll start by saying I love spy-themed entertainment as much as the next person. I love James Bond. I love Jason Bourne. But what I found in my research was that fictional spies were actually influencing real intelligence policy. And I mean that in two ways. The first is public opinion. So this started with a survey I did of my undergraduates back when I was at UCLA many years ago. And I found that spy-themed entertainment had really high correlation with their attitudes towards harsh interrogation techniques that many people regard as torture. And so I was stunned at this finding. And so I did national polls, and I found the same thing. So large differences in support for waterboarding, humiliation, lots of controversial interrogation techniques. The more people watch spy-themed entertainment, the more supportive they were of these techniques. Now, that doesn't say that spy-themed entertainment causes these attitudes, but it was a pretty disturbing finding. And then what I also found was that fictional spies were influencing what policymakers thought and what they were doing. So I'll give you one example. Leon Panetta, in his confirmation hearing to be CIA director, was asked a question right out of a TV or spy-themed movie, which was ticking time bomb scenario. A suspected terrorist is in custody. You think there's an imminent attack. What would you authorize the interrogators to do? And Panetta, who had come out, publicly against the use of torture, basically said he would do whatever it takes. So they called it the Jack Bauer exception. Now, bear in mind, the ticking time bomb scenario has never happened in real life. This is only something from the movies. So here you have a CIA director nominee being asked a real question from fiction, from senators on the Intelligence Committee, and answering it as though it were real.
And so what's the antidote to this? I mean, what would it look like for example, for intelligence agencies to become more transparent about what they do, and also for the public to be more aware of what the sort of ins and outs of these agencies are?
So I guess I'd say there are three things. The first is that intelligence agencies need to be more engaged in the public discourse. I don't mean that they have to reveal all the secrets and how they protect their sources and methods, but they need to be more forthcoming about what it is they do and how they do it to build trust among the American public. The second thing is that people like me in the academy need to put more effort into teaching about the world of intelligence. So one of the things I found is I looked at how many of the universities ranked by U.S. News and World Report in the top 25 offered any classes at all on intelligence. And I found that more of those universities offered courses on the history of rock and roll than anything intelligence related. So I tell my undergraduates they're more likely to learn about U2 the band rather than U2 the spy plane. So we need to do a better job of teaching the next generation about these secret agencies. And finally, the entertainment industry really needs to be held to account. It's wonderful to have creative license, but when there are movies like Zero Dark 30 that pretend to be a reported film or blur the line between documentary and real life, people think it's true. And in fact, that movie in particular takes a really disturbing license to portray itself as a reported or documentary-like film when in fact it's a work of fiction. It was so bad, actually, Morgan, that the acting director of the CIA at the time, Mike Morrell, had to write a memo to the workforce of CIA saying this movie is not accurate.
Spell that out for us. It's a really interesting story, and also the way that it unfolded after the film came out was sort of remarkable, especially the way you tell it in the book. What did that movie get wrong? Yeah.
So Zero Dark 30 starts off by having this frame that says, based on firsthand accounts of actual events, not inspired by, which we know is sort of loosely, related to, but based on firsthand accounts of actual events. And the director of that movie, Catherine Bigelow, award-winning director, went on sort of the entertainment circuit saying that this is a report. She called it a reported film, a first draft of history. But in fact, the film actually does many things to convey the idea that these enhanced interrogation techniques were the most important thing to finding bin Laden. And my research of the declassified record shows that is in fact not the case. And the CIA leadership said that was not the case, that many of the most important threads that led to the Abbottabad compound came through other means, not harsh interrogation techniques. This is a major issue in intelligence. And this movie really influenced what people thought, and it caused a firestorm when it came out.
So I should say that we've referenced your latest book, which came out in 2022, Spies, Lies, and Algorithms. I'm curious, if you were to release an updated edition of the book today, what would you need to update? What has changed in these 3 years?
Oh boy, a lot. This is the danger of writing about intelligence. Things change pretty fast. I'd say a couple big things have changed. The first, obviously, is the AI revolution. So I think some of the themes of the book, and obviously algorithms are in the title, the book is really about how emerging technologies, including AI, are transforming every aspect of the espionage business. That's true now to a degree it wasn't, even more so now than it was. So the speed of change is much greater. But I'd say there are two other big differences today. The first is that the international order that we've really come to accept since World War II is unraveling. Right, so we see this with dramatic transformations in the world, good and bad. The sense that the United States is not the indispensable ally that it has been in the past. That we're not going to be as engaged in NATO. That NATO has to provide for its own defense. We see China rising. We see transformation in the Middle East. So that international order is fundamentally different now than it's been in the past. And for intelligence, the second big change is this rise of technological and economic competition with China. So from an intelligence perspective, this is new business. So you think about, what do spy agencies do? For most of our history, they've collected intelligence about military capabilities and leadership. How do you know what Tencent or Alibaba or Huawei, what these companies are doing and what the implications are? What are U.S. tech companies doing? Our intelligence community was not designed to answer those questions. So who's ahead and who's behind in fill in the blank, AI, quantum computing, synthetic biology. Our spy agencies are not at all designed to answer those questions in a systematic way. That's a big deal from a national security perspective, that this is new business for the intelligence community, and they're not organized to do it well.
So there's so much there, but first I want to say, our show, True Spies, devotes a lot of attention to the collection of secrets, but something that I know you talk a lot about is how much work of the American intelligence agencies revolves around gathering open source information. How has the value of secrecy changed over time, and how is our digital age and AI changing that value?
So secrets, Morgan, are always going to be important. You can't figure out from what's openly available what Vladimir Putin is thinking or saying to his inner circle. So you're always going to need those clandestine capabilities to get into the insights of the leadership. But there's so much more now that is available to clever detectives online. And what that means for U.S. intelligence agencies is that they no longer dominate the collection analysis of intelligence like they once did. Anybody with a laptop can find out all sorts of information. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When Russia invaded Ukraine the first time in 2014, the best intelligence about troop movements in the country did not come from secrets. It came from selfies. Soldiers are young people, like young people everywhere. They love to take pictures of themselves and post them on social media. And so Russian soldiers were posting selfies on social media that were time-stamped with Ukrainian highway signs in the background. Much better information about what was happening on the ground from selfies than from secrets. In the Osama bin Laden raid in Abbottabad, the Pakistani military didn't see the operation coming, but a local guy heard weird noises outside his bedroom and ended up live tweeting the entire operation. Again, openly available information that could compromise the security of a highly classified operation. There are teams that I'm working with here at Stanford where they're discovering new signatures of nuclear activities in North Korea. How do you know what North Korea is doing? Based on commercial thermal satellites, which is measuring heat, right? These are undergraduates working with adult supervision using commercially available satellite capabilities to identify new ways to know what North Korea is doing. It's incredible what this open source world is making available or possible, not just to the good guys, but to the bad guys too.
With new, gentler scented Clorox disinfecting wipes, clean finally smells as good as it feels on everything from lamps to ceiling fans, even on your kid's toy shark. Oh, ouch. Clorox disinfecting wipes, now available in crisp lemon. Find it on Amazon. Clorox, clean feels good.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. Black Friday Game Day on Prime is an epic day of live sports. It all starts at 9 a.m. Eastern with the Capital One Skins game. Then, Black Friday football returns when the Bears take on the Eagles at 3 p.m. And it culminates with the final night of Emirates NBA Cup Group play with Bucks Knicks at 7 p.m. and Mavs Lakers at 10 p.m. Black Friday Game Day, only on Prime.
So you must be working on sort of shifting tectonic plates. I mean, so much of your work revolves around educating policymakers, helping bridge the divide between people in our political leadership and people in the tech world. I think when it comes to the topic of our policymakers understanding technology, the phrase that comes to mind for a lot of people, it certainly does for me, is Senator, we run ads, which Mark Zuckerberg said in 2018 and after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I know that you organized a series of cyber boot camps. I think the first was in 2014.
Yep.
For congressional staffers. Can you tell me about what inspired that event and sort of what your goals were?
So I took a leadership role at Stanford shortly before then, and I went to Washington on a listening tour. And I asked people in the policy world, what can we do that would be of most value to you? And they said, help educate the staff and the members of Congress about technology. In this case, it was really focused on cybersecurity. And one person said to me, if you do that, you will do a national service. So we created these cyber boot camps. Stanford had never done exec ed for policymakers before. And we brought out congressional staff to the Valley. And it was eye-opening for everyone. And so I call this, our mission is bridging the suit hoodie divide, right? How do the suits in Washington better understand the hoodies out here on the West Coast, and vice versa? So what we're finding is that folks in the Valley, whether you're an inventor or an investor, also need to better understand the policy world, because national security is involving all of us in ways it hasn't before. So those cyber boot camps were our first early foray into bridging the suit hoodie divide. And now we have this large and growing tech policy accelerator at the Hoover Institution. And our mission is actually to help decision makers in both the public and private sectors make better decisions to advance the national interest by sharing more continuously information about tech developments from leaders in those fields, in the labs on campus and in the Valley. So having the technological experts informing the policy debate much more systematically.
Can you characterize how American policymakers have evolved in their understanding of cybersecurity since 2014, that first boot camp?
Well, let me set the stage a little bit. 2014, it's a year after Edward Snowden, so there's a lot of distrust between industry out here in the Valley and Washington. And I'll never forget, we took the congressional staffers to a tech company, and a senior executive pointed at them and said, "We think of you," meaning the U.S. government, "as the enemy, just like the People's Liberation Army of China. We need to defend our networks from you every day." And this was an oh my God moment. A bunch of staffers went outside and started phoning the bosses saying, we have a lot more repair work to do here. Fast forward now, relations are much better between Silicon Valley and Washington, in part because of the trust building that policymakers have done, and in part because the world has changed. And it's pretty clear with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's rise and aggression that the Valley and the government need to work much more closely together.
This is one of my questions for you, thinking about, clearly you can see that the relationship has changed. Anybody who watched the presidential inauguration can see, with America's most prominent tech leaders standing directly behind the president, you can see that the relationship between Washington and Silicon Valley has changed. But I suppose I'm curious how we can begin to understand the way that policy is written and carried out in this new era that we're living in that seems very recent.
So I guess, speed is the big difference now compared to, say, even 10 years ago. So the threat landscape and technological developments in some areas are changing so fast, it's hard for policymakers to keep up. So the challenge there is, how do you give information that is current without, but also credible? And so the idea behind our Tech Policy Accelerator, our flagship product, is something called the Stanford Emerging Technology Review. And CEDAR, as we call it, is designed to educate policymakers on 10 emerging technological areas. And it's an annual report that we put out that is led by a senior faculty member in each of those areas. So the chairman of the electrical engineering department leads our semiconductors chapter, for example. So we want the people in the labs, in the field, actually weighing in on these issues to help policymakers understand them. And we have found in doing this now three years in a row that what policymakers really need is, number one, what is this technology and how does it actually work? Right? What is a semiconductor? What's the difference between the H20 and other chips that NVIDIA makes? Like basic technology. That's number one. Number two, what's happened in the past year? What should I know about that's not in the headlines? Because the media tends to gravitate to some things and misses other things that could be more important. For example, DeepSeek AI was a surprise to many people, including people in Washington. Not at all a surprise to my colleagues in AI here at Stanford. So how can we convey that information? So what is this technology? What's happened in the past year? And third, what are the implications over the horizon as we look further ahead? What are the possibilities? What are the challenges? How should policymakers think about these things? Those are the three main areas that we now provide to policymakers on a regular basis.
And you have worked with leadership across both major parties.
Yes.
Do you find that increased polarization has made it more difficult to get your message heard as a scholar?
Interestingly, in technology, I think there's real bipartisan interest and work across the aisle. So when we brief the AI caucus in the Senate, it's Democrats and Republicans coming together. Everybody needs more information about new technology. And as I often tell my friends who are very on one side or the other of politics, we don't have the luxury of opting out when there's a particular member of Congress or an administration that may have a different view. We have to opt in. This is about national security. And so we found actually remarkable bipartisan interest in what we've been doing in the executive branch as well as in the Congress. So we started this in the Biden administration. We're continuing in the Trump administration, and we found interest across those administrations.
The Who's down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs, but luckily there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
You mentioned DeepSeek, and I'm curious to sort of push you on this a little bit because I gather from what you've said publicly that your own feeling about how America ought to be bullish in pursuing some of these new technologies changed as a result of DeepSeek. Did I get that correct?
It did. My view really changed as a result of DeepSeek for a number of reasons. Number one, I mentioned, it was a surprise to many communities. Investors, right? The NASDAQ fell 3%. NVIDIA lost 17% of its market cap in one day, the single largest company stock market drop in U.S. history. And I know in the intelligence community, intelligence officials and policymakers were stunned. It should not have been a surprise. This was a near miss that we need to learn from. It could have been much more serious than it was. And what DeepSeek revealed are two things, I think, really. Number one, China's going to get there. Whether we like it or not, whether we export control high-end chips or not, China's going to get there in AI. So the DeepSeek model has pretty similar capabilities to the frontier models in the United States, and they did not use the most cutting-edge chips to the degree that American companies did. There was a lot of brute forcing and some clever engineering in different parts of the chips and how they worked with inference, and China got there. So the idea that we're going to cover our ears and close our eyes and bar the door, and that's going to lead to victory, is fatally misguided. That's what I think DeepSeek shows. The second thing that DeepSeek shows is that, and something that policymakers do not talk about enough, do not focus on enough, is the battle for talent. So the myth is China sends its best students to the United States. They learn everything here. They steal IP here, and they go back to China. Well, a research assistant and I looked at all of the authors of all of DeepSeek's papers that they have published, 5 papers, and what the backgrounds of those researchers has been. And we found that more than half of DeepSeek's cutting-edge AI researchers trained nowhere outside of China ever. This is a domestic talent pipeline. China doesn't need the United States to train its AI researchers in the way it did 10 or 20 years ago. So the United States is asymmetrically vulnerable on the talent side of AI. And so I think that should be a wake-up call to policymakers about the critical importance of talent as a national resource.
Yeah, speaking of the battle for talent, talk to me about the private sector drawing away from academia and what that could look like if this problem worsens for us.
Yeah, so I call it the eating the seed corn problem. So it's wonderful that great talent goes into industry, don't get me wrong. But the question is, if you siphon off the leading faculty talent to industry, who trains the next generation? Who's working on the frontier of discovery for the public interest, not private profit? And so the data show that more than 2/3 of PhDs in AI are going into industry. They're not going into academia. And I found that if you look at top computer science departments, in one, half the faculty in AI are part-time. In another, a third of the senior faculty have left academia entirely in the past 10 years. So you have this migration of talent from the academy to the private sector, and there's some benefits there. But long-term, we're hollowing out our ability to train the next generation.
Right, and also sinking money into applications rather than researching new technology. I mean, I think a lot of people understand all of the sort of accidental successes that have come out of NASA's work. And part of the problem with losing academic research is that, yeah, sure, you lose all of the sort of failed experiments, but you also lose some of the happy accidents.
I'm so glad you raised this, Morgan, because I think this is a critical issue. The innovation ecosystem that has made the United States the envy of the world actually starts with what we call fundamental research in universities. Crazy ideas that professors have that no venture capitalist would ever fund, like how do digital libraries work and how could they be improved? This was a National Science Foundation grant to Stanford faculty back in the 90s. And guess what came out of that? Google, right? Or how does the immune system work? And how can we better understand how the immune system works? 50 years of that kind of research, which was behind the, quote, overnight success of the COVID-19 vaccine. So the application layer that companies make profits on hinges on the fundamental research that professors with harebrained ideas that are driven to understand a particular field with no foreseeable commercial application, that's the secret sauce. Oh, and by the way, that's the model China is copying today. They are copying that university model and investing 6 times faster than the United States in that fundamental research. And at the current rate, they're going to overtake us by the end of the decade. So we're eroding that model. At the same time, China is racing to embrace it.
You mentioned the Emerging Technology Review. I'd love to hear you talk just a little bit more broadly about the Technology Policy Accelerator, which you started at the Hoover Institute. What are you up to there?
We're up to a lot of fun things. We are a startup that is scaling pretty fast. So I'll highlight a couple of things that we're really excited about. One of the things, given my work in intelligence, I'm particularly concerned about, and it relates to DeepSeek again, is how do we prevent strategic technological surprise? The mission of intelligence agencies, as your listeners know, I'm sure, is to prevent strategic surprise. Think Pearl Harbor, 9/11. We typically think of those surprises as attacks. How do you stop those bad things from happening, right? What does the technological surprise look like that could be devastating for the United States? How do we know? What are our assumptions? And what are the indicators that we should be following to know before it happens? That set of issues, I think, is of crucial importance. And so we're launching an initiative on preventing strategic technological surprise that's starting pretty soon. A couple other areas we're really excited about. We have a space policy initiative that's looking at the competition in outer space and what does it mean with the combination of militarization of space and commercial satellites in space for space safety and security and sustainability. So we have some true rocket scientists, aero-astro professors, working with policymakers and social scientists on a space policy initiative. And then we have a new initiative that we're calling Lab to Launch, which gets exactly what we just talked about, Morgan, which is what is the role of research universities in innovation? And how do we tell the story and collect the data for the American taxpayer or the public and policymakers about why should they care about investing in university research. What's the return on investment? If we were a stock and you were investing $100 at Stanford University in 1980, what would be the return on that investment in terms of benefits to the nation? So universities are complaining a lot about the changing funding environment, but we need to do a much better job of amassing the data and telling the story about why this investment matters for the country.
Amy, I have a question for you that's a little bit more personal. I'm really curious if I can ask, what is it that drives you? Because so much of what you do seems enormously challenging. And I wonder if your motivation is primarily intellectual curiosity, or if it's personal mission, or if it's just a deep anxiety, or if there's behind it a sort of moral sense of duty or of right and wrong, or maybe some combination of those things. I wonder how you think of it.
You've put your finger on pretty much all of them. I would say I catastrophize for a living. I figured out a way to monetize my natural tendency to go to the dark corner of every room and think, what are the bad things that could happen? So my colleagues in computer science, I'm part of the AI Institute at Stanford, and they joke that I see every technology as a weapon, because I do, right? So there's part of it is that sort of innate, I guess, in my upbringing. Part of it is I have a deep sense of patriotism. You know, my grandfather was an immigrant, came through Ellis Island, was one of 14 kids, and he became a legislator and a judge, first in his family to go to college. And I remember vividly as a kid, he would sit me on his lap and he would tell me how grateful he was to this country. And he said he was saving for my college from the day I was born, because he said education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. Right. And so his family, like many families, fled the pogroms in Eastern Europe, and he felt education was an opportunity, but there was also responsibility. So I feel very deeply about giving to my country in whatever way I can. So I think that's part of it. And then I guess the third piece of this, so there's the anxiety, there's the patriotism, and then there's I love hard problems, and I love opaque challenges. So I originally started studying China. I was an East Asian Studies major. I lived in Beijing right after Tiananmen. And I came back thinking, I will never fully understand this country. I need to switch topics. And I switched to the only area that's harder to understand, I think, than the Chinese Communist Party, which is U.S. spy agencies. So clearly I gravitate to things that are hard for outsiders to understand, because I really like the puzzle of figuring out what's wrong and how to make it better.
And where the anxiety piece is concerned, I'm asking this question from the perspective of somebody who reads the news and sees what's changed with AI over the course of, hours, it feels like. And my anxiety has spiked. I began this interview by asking you about what's changed since 2022 when your most recent book came out. And I'm wondering how your feeling about the situation has changed on an emotional level in the last few years.
I think, and this is sort of why I'm writing a new book on how emerging technology is changing power, national power, geopolitical power. And I think the herd is often wrong. And in this particular moment where there's so much disruption to how things have been for our whole lives, right? The international order that we're talking about, that I think policymakers are too often trapped in outdated thinking. New technologies aren't just new widgets. They are transforming the way that adversaries are behaving. Think election interference, gray zone conflict, using economic leverage around the world. China's doing this right now, right, with rare earth minerals, right, holding them hostage for their own gain. And so in some ways, it's a really challenging moment, but it's also for young people, for my students, it's an exciting moment. We need to think creatively anew about how new technologies are fundamentally changing the dynamics of geopolitics today. And so it's a really pivotal moment, I think, in geopolitics, and we have to embrace it not just with new technologies, but with new thinking.
Well, it's the perfect moment to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning in for the debrief. We hope you enjoyed that conversation between Amy Zegart and True Spies producer Morgan Childs. More debriefs are available exclusively to SPYSCAPE Plus subscribers. You'll also be able to access other premium series, like The Razumov Files, our ambitious retelling of Joseph Conrad's Under Western Eyes. And for true crime fans, there's The Great James Bond Car Robbery, the story of the hunt for James Bond's most notorious set of wheels. Subscribers also get new episodes of True Spies early and ad-free. Subscribe to SPYSCAPE Plus at plus.spyscape.com. Disclaimer. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the subject. These stories are told from their perspective, and their authenticity should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. If you're enjoying this podcast, please click now to give it a 5-star rating or leave a review. Ratings and reviews help people discover the podcast and help us bring you more great stories. And if you have some time, why not forward the podcast to a friend?